The twin suns of Turin cast long, silver-blue shadows across the transparent dome of Harmony Station. Inside, the interspecies education hub ticked forward with a hum of endless translation protocols, climate modulation, and carefully scheduled cycles meant to balance the needs of 39 species plus one. Earth had sent a delegation 5 years ago. The Intergalactic Academic Concord called it a diplomatic milestone. The rest of the student body called it a problem. Deathworlders had never mixed well. Room 112B was unusually quiet during early rest phase. The desks were hexagonal, bonded to the floor in case of sudden gravitic failure, and the air carried the faint sterile tang of sterilization bots, doing a poor job of masking crashing musk. Ryan sat at his station, hands neatly folded, eyes fixed forward. He hadn't spoken since fourth cycle. Not since Itrix had started. From his seat near the back, Merrick, a soft-bodied Erari, with skin like melted copper, watched. His inner membranes fluttered with nervous energy as he recorded notes from their xenolinguistics module. But his eye stalks kept swiveling, one always aimed at Ryan. Humans were baffling. Merrick had researched them. Hyper-adaptable, cortisol-heavy endocrine systems, bony skulls, notorious for sudden aggression and wild bursts of strength when threatened. And yet, this one sat through Etrix's cruel remarks like a stone under a waterfall. That morning, Etrix had accidentally knocked over Ryan's meal tray again. Oops, the Crasheen had rumbled, his voice like concrete being ground through rusted gears. Didn't see you there, bonesack. Ryan hadn't flinched, hadn't even blinked. He just retrieved his tray half empty now. Bits of Terran protein paste spattered across his uniform and sat down without a word. Merrick had watched the whole thing from a safe distance, heart nodes fluttering. Crasheen posturing was common, but prolonged, targeted aggression, that was different. Something was brewing. Yitrix was massive, even for a Crasheen adolescent. 2 meters tall, secondary arms half-developed, but still capable of lifting a bulk storage crate. His dorsal ridges were flared now, flashing red, a species-specific signal of dominance, visible even through his school-issue tunic. Ryan was small, even for a human. But there was something unnerving about the way he wasn't reacting. Itrix shoved. Ryan absorbed. Itrix shouted. Ryan blinked. Never once had he raised his voice, called for a counselor, or submitted a formal grievance. Other students noticed. Some whispered. A Nolak girl had even theorized loudly that Ryan might be developmentally stunted. No self-respecting Deathworlder would choose to endure humiliation. That theory died fast. The human had a way of listening without reacting that made people feel like they were being watched by something far older and colder than a 14-year-old boy. Even the staff were unsure. Humans were still under review. Species-wide classification, danger level red, mitigated by social protocols and cooperative diplomatic behavior. No one wanted to be the first to provoke an incident. That restraint didn't seem to apply to Etrix. During the next rest period, Ryan sat alone at the center table, the same spot he always chose, never at the edge, never backed into a corner, always where everyone could see him. Etrix lumbered in with his usual entourage, 2 spindly-winged Shkari and a juvenile Drenny who laughed at anything with teeth. The Crasheen's approach was thunderous. Merrick flinched involuntarily as Etrix stomped past. Still playing statue, Earthrat? Etrix sneered, looming over Ryan. Starting to think you're defective. Ryan said nothing. Etrix's right primary hand clenched, then opened. He jabbed a thick finger into Ryan's shoulder. Maybe you're just too scared to squeak. Ryan looked up. That was new. Merrick sucked in a breath. So did half the dining hall. Ryan's expression hadn't changed, calm, blank, but his eyes met Etrix's and didn't move. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Ryan lowered his gaze and resumed eating. Etrix laughed, too loud, too long. Thought so. What no one noticed except Merrick was the flex in Ryan's forearm, a single twitch of muscle, not defensive, not startled. Measuring. 3 cycles later, during xenobiology lab, Etrix knocked over a beaker into Ryan's lap. Scalding solvent meant for carapace-safe dissection. Ryan stood, blinking the sting from his legs, then calmly requested a med wipe and returned to his stool. Etrix didn't even get a warning. It was starting to feel like a game. By the 8th incident, whispers had shifted. Ryan wasn't being pitied anymore. He was being watched. Why doesn't he tell anyone? Marek asked his lab partner, a glistening gleer named Fan. The counselors would flag it as harassment immediately. Fan made a wet clicking sound. Maybe he wants Itrix to keep going. That's irrational. Fan shrugged with all 6 limbs. So are humans. Mid-cycle recess arrived, like the quiet before a meteor strike. The communal dining hall buzzed with its usual chaos. Marek slid into a seat near the perimeter, nibbling at a bowl of Glycera stalks, while keeping an eye on the center table. Ryan was already there, same posture, same expression. Itrix entered 5 minutes later. Everyone tensed. This time, the Krashin didn't come in roaring. He walked with casual ease, rolling his shoulders, smirking in a way only beings with gill folds could. His entourage peeled off at the door, lingering like hyenas just out of reach. Marek felt his internal temperature rise. Itrix approached. He stood directly behind Ryan, who didn't move. "Still pretending you don't hear me?" Itrix asked, louder now. "You think silence makes you what? Mysterious? Dangerous?" Ryan's tray was untouched. Marek's stalks bent forward. Something was wrong. Itrix leaned down, voice dropping. "I could break every joint in your body before the proctors even turned their heads." Ryan tilted his head slightly. "If you're going to say something," he said, his voice soft, almost conversational, "say it into my good ear." Itrix snorted and leaned in further. And Ryan's arm snapped up. No wind-up, no signal, just motion precise, explosive, utterly controlled. His hand gripped Itrix's jaw and pulled it down as his elbow drove upward under the Krashin's throat. A sickening pop echoed through the hall, followed by a loud, wet crack as vertebrae separated. Itrix crumpled like a cut vine. The dining hall went still. Marek's food hit the floor. Ryan sat back, exhaled through his nose, and quietly reached into his pocket. He withdrew a folded slip of translucent medical-grade polyfilm and laid it flat on the table. Then he raised his hand. "I'd like to report a defense incident," he said calmly. "Justified under Article 7, Clause 4, repeated psychological and physical stressors without institutional mitigation." Staff sprinted in, sirens chirped, a containment stretcher deployed with surgical efficiency. Itrix didn't move. Ryan didn't flee, didn't blink. He didn't even stand up. For 23 minutes, the dining hall remained locked down. Students were herded out in staggered species groups, first the aquatic breathers, then the fragile shelled, then the thermally unstable. Marek waited near the corridor junction with the Irari cluster, tail coils fidgeting as medical drones zipped past him. A green band had already been tagged around his upper limb. Witness secondary circle. Nobody talked. The Krashin boy's body was still on the floor, draped in stasis film. The posture was wrong, legs folded under at unnatural angles, upper arms twisted like broken branches. Marek caught one final glimpse before the retrieval team sealed the scene. Ryan was gone. Not escorted, not detained. He'd walked slowly, head down, flanked by 2 silent proctors toward the administrative dome. Not a word spoken, not a glance back. Marek's core temperature ran high with confusion and rising fear. The human hadn't moved a single meter during the entire incident, didn't threaten, didn't growl, just waited. And then broke a Krashin's spine like he was folding laundry. Ryan sat alone in Inquiry Room 2. No restraints, but the walls pulsed with an opaque privacy field. Every breath echoed slightly. Clinical air scrubbers whirred behind the panels. A recording node hovered quietly overhead, cycling its color from green to amber. A small thermoplastic chair faced him. The inquiry board had arrived. 3 figures entered, each from a different species. 1 Terran-accredited administrator, 1 Brelkin ethics monitor, and a gray-furred Zari counselor whose pupils tracked with eerie independence. Ryan didn't look at any of them. The chair across from him shifted. It was a deliberate movement, a flex of servos to mimic discomfort. The Terran administrator leaned forward, elbows on knees, a gesture meant to read casual concern. "Ryan," she said, "I'm Dean Holloway. Do you understand where you are?" "Yes." "Ah. Do you know why we're here?" Yes. Ah. Would you like to state, in your own words, what happened? Ryan didn't answer immediately. He closed his eyes, not in defiance, but as if reviewing a checklist. Then he spoke. Itrix Kalshan of the Krashin has been subjecting me to escalating social and physical aggression for 7 cycles. I filed 2 minor complaints through the student feedback interface, both of which were closed without escalation. Dean Holloway's mouth pressed into a line. On this date, Ryan continued, during mid-cycle recess, he approached from behind, placed himself within personal threat radius, and leaned toward my cervical region while issuing a direct physical threat. I used a counter-mobility technique under pressure to neutralize his ability to follow through. The Brelcan ethics monitor blinked its lower eyes. Neutralize is a generous term. You fractured his primary spinal column and displaced 2 intervertebral joints. I didn't choose the angle of his approach, Ryan replied, voice flat. I chose to survive. That hung in the room. The Zari counselor tilted its head. Were you afraid, Ryan? Yes, he said simply. Every time he entered the room. Dean Holloway glanced at the other 2 before tapping her wristpad. According to your intake profile, you're trained in terrestrial biomechanical response conditioning. Your family background includes 2 licensed security specialists and 1 retired orbital recon operator. Yes. Ah. Are you trained in lethal joint manipulation? I'm trained in non-lethal restraint and reversal methods. Lethality depends on target physiology. The Brelkin gave a low chirp. Do you regret what happened? That time, Ryan looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from tears, but from exhaustion. It wasn't the weariness of someone who just committed violence. It was the weight of waiting. Every minute since he first pushed me, Ryan said. The official report was published to the station-wide grid 12 hours later. Self-defense. Exonerated. Counseling recommended. A follow-up memorandum clarified that Krashin physiology presented an unanticipated risk in restraint interactions. The Educational Council pledged to review threat training and update interspecies de-escalation protocols. In less formal channels, panic spread like mold in 0G. A Deathworlder child had disabled a Krashin bully without standing up. The data clip leaked. Someone had captured it on a bio-embedded lens. Within minutes, the footage was circulating across 4 domes and 27 subnets. Freeze-frame memes, reaction analysis, wild speculation. Merrick watched it loop again in the privacy of his dorm pod, frame by frame. Ryan's posture didn't change. His arm blurred upward. The crack, the collapse. Then silence. He replayed it. Again. And again. Each time, the moment seemed quieter. The human's face never shifted. Station Harmony tried to return to schedule. Recess cycles resumed. Shared courses were temporarily paused, then staggered by species. Ryan didn't come back to class for 3 days. When he did, no one spoke to him. No one sat near him. The cafeteria was quieter now. No shouting, no posturing. The Shkari twins kept to themselves. The juvenile Drenny, who used to laugh at everything, wouldn't make eye contact. Ryan moved through the day like a ghost wrapped in skin. No swagger, no pride, just quiet gravity. Marek saw him outside the observation deck one evening, looking out at the twin suns. Not brooding, just watching. He approached, cautiously. Ryan didn't move. I saw what happened, Marek said, his voice trembling. I mean, not the moment, but before. I watched him harass you for weeks. I should have reported it too. Ryan didn't look at him. I'm not angry, Marek added quickly. I just don't understand. Ryan exhaled softly. What part? Why didn't you do anything sooner? You could have. Ryan's jaw tightened. If I'd reacted early, they'd have seen a human attacking a Krashin. That's not self-defense. That's species escalation. You were waiting for proof? No, I was waiting for permission. That silenced Marek. Ryan finally turned to look at him. Sometimes restraint is the only thing that keeps people from fearing us more than they already do. I don't fear you. You should. It wasn't a threat. It was a resignation. Marek shook his head. I don't fear you because you waited. He gave you every excuse not to. Ryan looked back at the suns. Waiting didn't make it hurt less. Etrix survived. The medical update arrived days later. Emergency neural reconstruction successful. He would regain partial mobility. Crashing musculature could regenerate spinal structures under certain stasis conditions. Recovery would take months, no re-enrollment until next cycle, if at all. No one cheered. No one mourned. Merrick heard one of the station techs mutter under his breath, "He's lucky it was a quiet one." Rumors multiplied like spores. Was Ryan genetically modified? Military trained? Was his silence a psychological weapon? Did all humans wait like that? The real answer was simpler. He didn't wait out of strategy. He waited because if he didn't, he'd be the villain. And no one wanted to hear the human explain himself after someone else was broken. The medbay ceiling was too bright. Ryan blinked against the light, gaze trailing the dull silver strip where one panel flickered slightly, a flaw in the station's maintenance cycle. He noted it absently, like he noted everything else. The pain in his forearm was sharp this time, not from injury, but overuse. He hadn't meant to use that much force. The motion had been automatic. He could still feel the way Etrix's skin had shifted under his grip, the unnatural slide of tissue folding around a dislocated spine. He could still hear the sound. He flexed his fingers. Tendons tugged in protest. He'd iced the joint after the incident quietly, before reporting. The compression wrap was gone now. Med staff had checked him for strain. Muscle overuse, the nurse had told him. Minor micro tears, nothing displaced. You'll have inflammation for a few days. Standard treatment protocol applies no anti-inflammatories if you want it to heal properly. Ice, elevation, rest. Rest. That word again. He didn't sleep much now. Couldn't. His body demanded stillness, but his brain kept running simulations, different outcomes, different angles. What if he'd hesitated? What if Etrix hadn't leaned far enough? What if someone else had stepped in? But no one had. Not once. Elsewhere, the Administrative Council was in damage control. Station Harmony prided itself on cultural integration, shared housing, shared lessons, mixed recreational periods. But the Ryan Whitrix incident had rippled out in layers the council hadn't anticipated. 2 NOLAC parents requested emergency transfer. A Vreen faculty liaison asked whether human students should be required to disclose their training history at enrollment. The Crashing ambassador issued a diplomatic inquiry, thinly veiled outrage masquerading as concern. Dean Holloway spent 5 straight hours drafting 3 different versions of the same statement, each one less apologetic than the last. In the end, she went with transparency. The incident was unfortunate. The response was legally permitted. The human child acted within institutional rights of self-preservation. The backlash was quiet, but heavy. Every student knew it now. The human didn't just survive a death world. He carried it inside him. Ryan's first class back was stellar cartography. No group seating, no pressure to speak. Merrick was already there when Ryan entered. "Your seat's open," Merrick said, gesturing toward the desk beside him. Ryan Saturday said nothing. The lecture began. A hologrid shimmered into existence overhead, a spinning star field with shifting spatial markers, each orbit tagged with multilingual identifiers. As the room darkened to accommodate the display, Merrick leaned over, whispering, "Did you mean to do it that way? The neck, I mean." Ryan didn't turn his head. "I meant to stop him." "You could have just hit him." "No," Ryan said, "not from that angle. He was overextended. He leaned into it." Merrick went still. "You calculated it." "I recognized it." Ryan's voice was quiet but sharp with edge. "He gave me the vector. I gave him the result." The room dimmed further as the hologrid zoomed toward the terrene system, focusing on orbital anomalies. Merrick didn't say anything else. But he didn't move away either. The next confrontation didn't come from a student. It came from a policy review officer. Yorvi Talon, B-class regulator from the Interspecies Safety Commission, requested a private interview with Ryan. Officially, it was listed as a post-incident evaluation for public safety calibration. Unofficially, it was to see if the quiet human was dangerous. The room was different this time. No soft lighting, no counselor present, just Ryan, a table, and a tall insectoid regulator, with an exoskeleton that shimmered like obsidian dust. Talon observed him for nearly 5 minutes before speaking. "Your muscle-to-mass ratio is lower than the average Krashin adolescent," he said finally. "Yes," Ryan replied. "And your strike force was not enough to fracture bone." "No. You aimed for structural leverage." "Yes." Talon's antennae twitched slightly. "Do you feel threatened here?" "Yes." Talon nodded. "Do you intend to harm anyone else?" Ryan stared at him. "Only if someone gives me a reason." That answer was added to the file verbatim. So was the recommendation. Subject is not a threat in general population unless provoked. Avoid unnecessary escalation. Maintain counseling access. Continue integration. It was a bureaucratic way of saying, he's safe, until he isn't. 3 days later, during a communal learning module on species empathy frameworks, the instructor made a tactical error. "Ryan," she said, far too casually, "perhaps you could share how Earth cultures handle conflict resolution?" The room froze. Ryan looked up from his data slate. He didn't argue, didn't push back, he just spoke. "Depends on how many people are watching." The instructor blinked. "In private," Ryan continued, "we use social cues, verbal de-escalation, or ritualized physical contests, non-lethal. If the dispute is public, we usually perform restraint until forced to respond." She hesitated. "And what forces a response?" Ryan met her eyes. "Pain. Or helplessness." It was not the answer she wanted. But it was the one everyone remembered. By the second week, changes were visible. The proctors altered their patrol cycles. 2 now lingered in high-density corridors during rest periods. Informal peer mediation groups were reintroduced. A quiet memo was sent to all staff about species-specific trauma response protocols. And Ryan faded again. Not into the background he was too well known now, but into a kind of social neutrality. Students stopped whispering when he entered. They nodded, sometimes cautiously, sometimes curiously. But no one taunted him. Not anymore. Some even began asking him questions in passing. One Drenny girl approached him after class and said, "Is it true humans can survive 3 days in open air, if the temp's right?" Ryan shrugged. "Depends what's in the air." Another student, a lanky Tarakian boy, offered him a dried nutrient bar from his homeworld. "They say it tastes like iron." Ryan accepted it. "We're used to that." Merrick watched all of it, silent. He started sitting with Ryan more often. Not every class. Just enough. Not because he wanted protection, but because something about Ryan made you feel like you were safer just knowing what he wouldn't do. Yitrix was transferred off station 10 days post-incident. The stasis unit was shipped with private security detail and a rehabilitation specialist. No statement was issued. No apology either. Merrick caught wind of a rumor that Yitrix's family filed a grievance against the school, not against Ryan. They were Krashin traditionalists. If their son had been defeated in direct confrontation, then he'd failed the right of dominance, and whatever happened was on him. That story spread, quietly. And slowly, the story of Ryan changed. From the boy who broke a Krashin, to the boy who waited. That part frightened people more. The first snowfall on Harmony Station came 3 weeks after the incident. Of course, it wasn't real snow, just a synthetic atmospheric simulation triggered by Earthside holidays, a concession to the human cultural calendar. White flakes drifted across the biodome, melting into non-toxic vapor before they hit the floor. Some species found it baffling, others found it beautiful. Ryan barely looked at it. He sat cross-legged near the edge of the botanical dome, watching the synthetic pine trees rustle under the ventilation system's subtle wind shift. It was quiet here, always was. He came here more often now. No one asked him why. He wasn't shunned, not exactly, not anymore. The fear had worn thin, replaced by a kind of quiet respect, not admiration, not quite. It was something more uncertain, like gravity unseen but undeniable. Merrick padded up behind him, his copper skin refracting the ambient light. He settled beside Ryan, careful to leave the correct buffer distance between species. "You missed your comms lab," Merrick said softly. Ryan didn't look up. Didn't feel like simulating cheerful negotiations today. You know you scare them less now, right? Only because I'm quiet again. Merrick's inner membranes twitched. That's not the only reason. Ryan turned to him. There was no anger in his eyes, just the ever-present tiredness, a weariness that had nothing to do with sleep. I didn't want any of this, Merrick. I know. They sat in silence for a while, watching synthetic snow dissolve in midair. The station hosted a joint cultural showcase a week later. Standard policy mandatory for all interspecies academies. Each species could present art, music, or history. Students volunteered. Or were volunteered. Humans, predictably, struggled to agree on a single piece. After internal debate and quiet faculty nudging, Ryan was asked to represent his species. Dean Holloway approached him herself. You don't have to perform, she said gently. Just show something of Earth, something honest. Ryan nodded. 2 days later, he submitted a file. No explanation. No title. Just footage. The showcase chamber was filled with students and faculty from every dome. Ryan took no stage. He stood in the back while his submission played overhead. A flickering blue Earth, then footage from old human archives. Wildfires, tsunamis, earthquakes, rescue workers digging through rubble, a bloodied nurse performing CPR under falling ash, a man carrying 3 children through a flood, a woman crawling with a broken leg to signal for help. Then, silence. Then, laughter. Children playing in mud, an old couple dancing under collapsing rain, a teenage girl repairing a solar panel with duct tape and chewing gum, a group of boys building a shelter from scrap. No music, just natural sound. Life, happening in chaos. Survival, without drama. When the lights came back on, no one spoke. The Drenny chittered nervously. One of the Vreen delegates blinked all 6 eyes, visibly overwhelmed. Even the Krashin representative, an adult, not a student, nodded once. Ryan left before the applause started. Later that cycle, during cleanup duty in the common corridor, a young Clarari boy stepped up to Ryan with a box of nutrient gels. Trade? He asked nervously. Ryan glanced down. For what? Safety advice. Ryan blinked. For who? The boy looked around and lowered his voice. Everyone. Ryan accepted the gel, mostly out of habit. Rule 1, he said, peeling the seal. Don't escalate unless you want to get escalated back. The boy nodded rapidly. Rule 2, don't poke someone who can afford to wait. The boy swallowed and backed away without another word. Merrick found Ryan in the med bay again, days later. Not for injury this time, but for his final physical review before the cycle's end. Dr. Kale, the station's lead biophysician, was scanning Ryan's elbow. You healed slower than expected, she noted. Normal, for the damage. You used ice and no meds? Ryan nodded. Why no medication? She asked. Pain reminds me not to repeat the mistake. Kale's gaze lingered, then moved to Merrick. Take care of your friend, she said. Even quiet ones carry weight. She left. Merrick exhaled. You're transferring out next cycle, aren't you? Ryan looked at him. It's not official. But you are. Ryan nodded. Merrick's limbs coiled tightly, a sign of restraint in Irari culture. Why? They need time, to see someone else, to let the story fade. You didn't do anything wrong. I know. But it still follows you. Ryan stood slowly. It will. For a while. That's how gravity works. On his final day, Ryan returned to the dining hall. The table was clean now. No stains, no shadows. The central seating arrangement had been changed, tables spread wider, more space between clusters. He sat in the same spot anyway. Merrick joined him. So, Merrick said, folding his limbs carefully. What do I tell the new students next cycle? Ryan paused, then reached into his pocket. He placed a small card on the table. A simple Terran quote. I don't start fights, but I know how to end them. Merrick stared at it. That's not very comforting. Ryan stood. It's not meant to be. He walked away. Not with a swagger, not with pride. Just quiet steps. Measured. Unhurried. Students watched him go. Some whispered, some didn't. But none ever called him weak again. And none forgot that he never even stood up until the very end.